A maid shelters an elderly woman during a snowstorm. The next day, the millionaire finds out and changes everything. Subscribe to The Maid's Secret for more stories. Don't risk missing the next story. Follow, comment, and share. Let's begin. The wind howled like a wounded animal as Emma Mitchell finished polishing the last of the mahogany tables in the East Wing. Her reflection stared back at her from the gleaming surface. Tired eyes, dark hair pulled back in a practical bun, the standard black and white uniform that rendered her practically invisible in the Laurent mansion. Outside, snow pelted against the tall windows with increasing ferocity, each flake illuminated briefly by the mansion's exterior lights before disappearing into the growing drifts. "Just finish the East Wing and you can go home," she whispered to herself, repeating Mrs. Caldwell's instructions. The head housekeeper had dismissed the rest of the staff hours ago when the weather reports warned of the impending blizzard, but Emma lived just a mile away. She had insisted she could finish and walk home before the worst hit. She had been wrong. The Laurent mansion was different at night, especially the East Wing. During daylight hours, Emma could almost ignore the fact that this section of the sprawling estate had belonged to the late Victoria Laurent. But at night, with only the soft glow of lamps, Emma swore she could still smell the faint trace of Chanel No. 5 that Victoria had favored, as if the very walls had absorbed it over decades. 3 years after her death, Sir Adrian Laurent still kept this wing exactly as his wife had left it. No one entered except to clean, and even then, with explicit instructions that nothing was to be moved, altered, or removed. Emma checked her watch. 9:43 p.m. The storm had worsened considerably since she'd last looked outside. What had been light snowfall 2 hours ago was now a full-fledged blizzard, with visibility reduced to nearly nothing. Even the lights of the gatehouse, normally visible from these windows, had disappeared into the whiteout. "Perfect," she muttered, knowing she'd have to call a ride-share service, which would cost a day's wages at storm surge pricing, if anyone was even driving in this weather. As Emma gathered her cleaning supplies, the mansion groaned against the wind. These old houses, no matter how expensively maintained, always complained during storms. She had learned the sounds over her 2 years working here. The creak of the third step on the main staircase, the tick-tick-tick of the grandfather clock in the main hall, the gentle hum of the state-of-the-art heating system. Tonight, however, every sound seemed amplified by the emptiness. She made her way downstairs, switching off lights as she went. The staff quarters were in the West Wing, connected to the kitchen, a modern addition to the century-old mansion. Emma decided she would make herself a cup of tea before calling for a ride. Perhaps the storm would let up at least a little. The kitchen was warm and comforting compared to the rest of the house. Emma filled the kettle and leaned against the marble countertop, watching the snow through the window above the sink. It was hypnotic, almost peaceful from inside this fortress of luxury. That's when she heard it, a sound so faint she thought she had imagined it. A tapping, barely audible above the storm. Emma froze, listening intently. There it was again, 3 gentle knocks coming from the side entrance that the staff used. Her first thought was that it might be one of the other maids who had forgotten something, but Mrs. Caldwell had been adamant that everyone had left. Her second thought, one that sent a chill down her spine despite the warmth of the kitchen, was more alarming. The Laurent estate was secluded, surrounded by acres of private land. Who would be at that door in the middle of a blizzard? Common sense told her to ignore it, to pretend she hadn't heard anything. Security protocols were strict at the mansion, and Mr. Laurent's personal security team had drilled into the staff, never to open doors to unexpected visitors, regardless of circumstances. Yet something pulled her toward the sound. Emma moved cautiously to the side entrance, her steps quiet against the polished floor. The small window in the door revealed nothing but swirling white. She hesitated, her hand on the deadbolt. "Who's there?" she called, trying to sound more confident than she felt. No answer came. Emma was about to turn away when she saw a shadow move beyond the glass, a hunched figure barely visible through the snow. Against her better judgment, Emma cracked the door open, the security chain still in place. A gust of freezing air rushed in, carrying snow and the unmistakable sound of labored breathing. "Hello?" Emma called again. The figure moved closer, an elderly woman, her thin frame bent against the wind. Her coat was completely soaked through, her grey hair plastered to her head, her lips an alarming shade of blue. But what struck Emma most were her eyes, clear, intelligent, and kind, despite the obvious distress. The woman's mouth moved, but no sound came out. She tried again, and this time Emma caught a whisper carried on the wind. "I just need somewhere warm for the night." Every rule in the Laurent household manual flashed through Emma's mind. No unauthorized visitors, no exceptions, immediate termination for security breaches. Yet as she looked at the woman, trembling, clearly hypothermic, Emma knew she couldn't close the door. "Come in," she said, removing the security chain. "Quickly." The woman stepped inside, bringing with her the scent of cold and a profound silence. Now, in the light of the hallway, Emma could see her more clearly. She was older than Emma had initially thought, perhaps in her late 70s, with a dignity that even her current state couldn't diminish. Her clothes, though soaked, were of good quality, not the outfit of someone homeless or destitute. "You're freezing," Emma said, helping the woman remove her wet coat. "Let's get you warm." The woman nodded gratefully but remained silent. When she tried to speak again, her hands rose instinctively, making a small gesture that Emma recognized from her cousin, who was deaf, a request for water. "You can't speak?" Emma asked, mimicking the gesture to confirm. The woman shook her head slightly, then made another gesture, pointing to her throat and making a cutting motion. "Your voice is gone, from the cold," Emma guessed. A nod. "Let me get you something warm to drink and dry clothes," Emma said, guiding the woman to the staff dining area where a small fireplace was already lit. "Wait here." Emma hurried to her locker in the staff changing room, grabbing her spare uniform sweater and the flannel pajama pants she sometimes changed into for the walk home. They wouldn't fit well, but they were dry. She also took the small throw blanket she kept for breaks when the mansion grew too cold. When she returned, the woman hadn't moved, except to hold her hands toward the fire, still shivering violently. "Here," Emma said, offering the clothes. "The bathroom is through that door. You can change while I make some tea." The woman took the clothes with trembling hands and a grateful nod. While she changed, Emma prepared 2 cups of tea and retrieved the small container of soup she had brought for her lunch, but hadn't eaten. She heated it quickly in the microwave, nothing fancy, just chicken noodle from the grocery store, but it was hot and nourishing. When the woman emerged, swimming in Emma's clothes but looking marginally warmer, Emma guided her to the small table. "It's not much," she said, placing the soup and tea before her. "But it should help." The woman's eyes filled with tears as she looked at the simple meal. She reached for Emma's hand and squeezed it, then made a gesture Emma understood immediately. "Thank you." As the woman ate slowly, Emma studied her more carefully. There was something familiar about her face, something in the line of her jaw and the shape of her eyes that tugged at Emma's memory, but she couldn't place it. "How did you end up at the door?" Emma asked, knowing the woman couldn't give a detailed answer, but hoping for some explanation. The woman looked up from her soup and made a series of gestures. Emma didn't understand sign language beyond the basics, but she gathered that the woman had been in a car that had stopped working. She had seen the lights of the mansion and walked toward them. "You shouldn't have been out in this weather," Emma said, though without judgment. "Where were you trying to go?" The woman's expression changed subtly, a flash of something like purpose, then hesitation. She made another gesture, pointing to the house around them, then to herself. Then she reached into the pocket of her wet coat, which Emma had hung by the fire, and withdrew a small, water-damaged photograph. With shaking hands, she passed it to Emma. The photo, though warped from the water, was still clear enough. It showed a much younger version of the woman standing beside a handsome man in front of what was unmistakably the Laurent mansion. They were smiling, their arms around each other. Emma's breath caught. "You know this house?" The woman nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving Emma's face. "Who are you?" "Who?" Emma whispered, a strange feeling settling in her stomach. But the woman simply shook her head, fatigue evident in every line of her face. She made a sleeping gesture, and Emma understood that whatever secrets this woman carried, they would have to wait until morning. "Of course, you need rest," Emma said. "You can sleep here by the fire. I'll bring you a pillow." As Emma arranged a makeshift bed on the staff room's small couch, she knew she should call someone, Mrs. Caldwell, or the security team, or even the police. But something held her back. This woman, whoever she was, had come to this specific house in a blizzard. She had a photograph. There was a story here, and Emma felt an inexplicable need to understand it before involving others. Once the woman was settled, wrapped in Emma's blanket, and another she'd found in the linen closet, Emma sat in the armchair across from her. "I have to stay awake to make sure the fire doesn't go out," she explained, though it wasn't entirely true. The fireplace was gas and perfectly safe, but Emma wasn't ready to leave this mysterious visitor alone in the Laurent mansion. The woman smiled faintly, seeming to understand the real reason. She reached out and patted Emma's hand once more, before settling back and closing her eyes. Within minutes, her breathing had deepened into sleep, the lines of worry and cold smoothing from her face. Emma watched her, questions tumbling through her mind. Who was this woman? How did she know this house? And why did Emma have the unsettling feeling that by opening that door tonight, she had set something significant in motion? Outside, the storm continued to rage, snow building against the windows like a wall of white. Inside, in the warm glow of the fire, Emma sat vigil beside a stranger who had arrived like a ghost from the past. A past somehow connected to the Laurent family and this very house. Emma had no way of knowing that when morning came, everything would change, that the simple act of mercy, opening a door during a storm, would unravel secrets long buried and alter the course of multiple lives, including her own. For now, she simply watched over the sleeping woman, listening to the howl of the wind and wondering what the dawn would bring. That night, as the mansion creaked and settled around them, Emma drifted in and out of sleep in the armchair. Each time she opened her eyes, she half expected to find the woman gone, a strange dream conjured by the storm and her solitude. But each time, the elderly figure remained, sleeping peacefully under the blankets, her face softened in the dying firelight. In those quiet hours, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she had seen the woman somewhere before. Perhaps in a photograph in one of the many albums Victoria Laurent had kept meticulously in the East Wing library, or maybe mentioned in one of the conversations between staff members who had worked for the family for decades, longer than she had. As the first grey light of dawn filtered through the windows, Emma rose stiffly from the chair. The storm had finally subsided, leaving an eerie stillness in its wake. Through the window, she could see that the world had been transformed, buried under at least 2 feet of pristine snow that glittered in the early morning light. She checked her phone. 3 missed calls from Mrs. Caldwell and a text asking if she had made it home safely. Emma quickly responded that she had stayed at the mansion due to the storm, leaving out any mention of her unexpected guest. She would have to explain eventually, but not yet, not until she understood more. Emma glanced at the woman, still sleeping, and decided to make breakfast. Whatever happened next, they would both need strength to face it. She had just finished brewing coffee when she heard it, the unmistakable sound of the security system disarming at the main entrance, followed by footsteps in the foyer. Emma froze, coffee pot in hand. It was barely 7 a.m. The staff weren't due until 8, and Mrs. Caldwell had mentioned that the roads might not be cleared until midday. The footsteps grew closer, confident, purposeful steps that she recognized immediately. Sir Adrien Laurent was home. 3 days early. Emma's heart hammered against her ribs as the footsteps drew closer. Sir Adrien Laurent wasn't due back from his business trip to Tokyo until the weekend. His early return could only mean one thing. The snowstorm had altered his plans, just as it had changed hers. She hastily set down the coffee pot, her mind racing. There was no time to wake the elderly woman or hide her presence. All she could do was brace for the inevitable confrontation. "Hello?" Adrian's deep voice called out. "Is someone here?" Emma stepped into the hallway, unconsciously smoothing her wrinkled uniform. "Good morning, sir. It's Emma Mitchell. I stayed overnight because of the storm." Adrian Laurent stood in the entrance to the kitchen, his tall frame silhouetted against the morning light streaming through the windows behind him. At 43, he cut an imposing figure, broad-shouldered and fit, with dark hair just beginning to silver at the temples and piercing blue eyes that seemed to evaluate everything they fell upon. "Miss Mitchell," he acknowledged with a slight nod. Despite his formal manner, there was no coldness in his voice. "I'm glad you found shelter. The roads are treacherous." "Thank you, sir. I was just making coffee. Would you like some?" Adrian moved further into the kitchen, setting his briefcase on the counter. "Please. My flight was diverted to Buffalo. I've been driving since midnight to get back." Emma turned to prepare his coffee, hoping against hope that the elderly woman would remain asleep just a little longer. But fate had other plans. A small sound from the staff dining area, the creak of the old couch, made Adrian pause. "Is someone else here?" he asked, his voice immediately taking on an edge of suspicion. Before Emma could answer, Adrian strode toward the sound. She followed, coffee forgotten, her stomach knotting with dread. Adrian stopped abruptly in the doorway. The elderly woman had awakened and was sitting up, blinking in confusion at the sudden intrusion. The blanket had slipped from her shoulders, revealing Emma's oversized sweater. Her silver hair fell in soft waves around a face lined with age, but still striking in its bone structure. For a moment, no one spoke. Then something extraordinary happened. Adrian Laurent, the man known in business circles for his unshakable composure, stumbled backward as if physically struck. The color drained from his face as he stared at the woman. "Mother!" The word escaped him in barely a whisper, filled with disbelief. The cup Emma had been holding slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. But neither she nor Adrian noticed. She stared between them, seeing now what had eluded her in the darkness, the unmistakable resemblance. The same blue eyes, the same proud jawline, features that time had softened in the woman but remained sharp in the man. The elderly woman, Adrian's mother, rose shakily to her feet, her eyes filled with tears as she raised trembling hands, making a series of fluid gestures that Emma now recognized as sign language. Adrian responded in kind, his hands moving with practiced ease, though they shook slightly. A silent conversation unfolded before Emma, intimate, urgent, and completely incomprehensible to her. After several exchanges, Adrian turned to Emma, his expression a complex mixture of shock, confusion, and something that looked almost like gratitude. "You brought her in?" he asked, his voice carefully controlled. Emma swallowed hard. "Yes, sir. During the storm last night, she was at the side entrance, soaking wet and freezing. I couldn't turn her away. Do you know who she is?" "Not until just now, sir. She couldn't speak. I thought because of the cold. She showed me an old photograph of this house, but..." Emma trailed off, uncertain how to continue. Adrian's gaze remained on her for a long moment before he nodded slowly. "She had a stroke 5 years ago. It affected her speech, not her mind." He turned back to his mother, signing again before gently guiding her to sit back down. "Sir," Emma ventured, I was under the impression that your mother was living abroad." A shadow crossed Adrian's face. "That's what everyone was led to believe, including me, until 3 months ago." He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of uncertainty from a man who prided himself on always being in control. "Ms. Mitchell, would you please make that coffee now, and perhaps some tea for my mother? We have much to discuss." Emma nodded, grateful for the momentary reprieve, and hurried back to the kitchen. As she arranged a tray with coffee, tea, and some toast from the bread she found in the freezer, her mind spun with questions. Everyone knew the story, or thought they did. Evelyn Laurent, Adrian's mother, had left the country after her husband's death 12 years ago. There had been rumors of a family rift, of inheritance disputes, but nothing concrete. Sir Adrian never spoke of her, and the staff knew better than to ask. Yet here she was, in the flesh. And from Adrian's reaction, her presence wasn't entirely unexpected, just not in this way, not on this day. When Emma returned to the staff dining room with the tray, Adrian had pulled a chair close to his mother. They were still communicating silently, their hands moving in patterns Emma couldn't follow. There was urgency in their gestures, and several times Evelyn reached out to touch her son's face, as if reassuring herself he was real. Emma set down the tray quietly, intending to leave them to their reunion, but Adrian looked up. "Please stay, Ms. Mitchell. Mother wants you here." Surprised, Emma took a seat at the far end of the table. "Is there anything else she needs? I could find proper clothes." "That can wait," Adrian said, pouring tea for his mother with careful movements. "First, I need to understand what happened, how you found each other." Evelyn made a series of signs, and Adrian translated. "She says she was coming to see me, that she's been trying to reach me for months." Emma nodded. "She indicated she'd been in a car that broke down in the storm." Another exchange of signs. Adrian's expression darkened. "A taxi. She flew into Rochester yesterday and took a taxi, but the driver refused to continue in the blizzard and left her at the end of the county road. She walked nearly a mile in the storm." Emma gasped. "She could have died out there." "Yes," Adrian said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "She could have." He signed something to his mother, who shook her head firmly in response. "She says she had no choice, that she had to see me immediately." Adrian ran a hand over his face. "Mother, whatever it is, could have waited until—" Evelyn's hand shot out, gripping her son's wrist with surprising strength. She shook her head vehemently and began signing again, her movements sharp and insistent. Adrian watched, his expression growing more troubled with each passing second. When she finished, he sat back in his chair, visibly shaken. "What is it?" Emma asked, unable to contain herself. Adrian looked at her as if he'd momentarily forgotten her presence. After a pause, he said, "She says someone has been intercepting her communications, letters, emails, phone calls through her nurse. That someone in my company has been deliberately keeping us apart." His voice hardened. "And that same someone has been lying about my father's estate." Emma sat very still, aware that she was witnessing something intensely private, a family secret unraveling in real time. Evelyn signed again, then looked pointedly at Emma. "She says," Adrian translated slowly, "that when you opened the door last night, it wasn't just coincidence. She believes it was providence." His eyes met Emma's. "She's been trying to reach this house, to reach me, for years. And you, Ms. Mitchell, are the first person who actually let her in." The weight of those words settled over the room. Emma thought about the security protocols, the carefully controlled access to the Laurent estate, the layers of staff and assistants that surrounded Adrian at all times. How many barriers would someone have to navigate to simply speak with him directly? "Sir," Emma said carefully, "I broke protocol by letting her in. I should have called security, or Mrs. Caldwell at the very least." "And if you had," Adrian replied quietly, "she would have been turned away." Again, he looked at his mother, something like pain crossing his features. "The question is, who gave those orders, and why?" The room fell silent except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. Outside, the snow-covered grounds glistened in the strengthening morning light, pristine and peaceful, a stark contrast to the tension building within the mansion's walls. Evelyn Laurent reached for the small handbag that had been dried by the fire overnight. From it, she withdrew a folded document, water-damaged but still legible. She handed it to her son with trembling fingers. Adrian unfolded it, his eyes scanning the pages with increasing intensity. When he looked up, his expression had transformed. The confusion was gone, replaced by a cold fury that made Emma involuntarily shrink back in her chair. "Richard," he said, the name like venom on his tongue. "It's been Richard all along." Evelyn nodded solemnly, then turned to Emma with a gentle smile. She reached out, taking Emma's hand in her weathered one, and squeezed it in silent gratitude. In that moment, Emma understood that her simple act of kindness, opening a door during a storm, had set in motion events that would change everything. Not just for the Laurents, but for her as well. The storm outside had passed, but inside the Laurent mansion, a different kind of tempest was just beginning to gather force. The name Richard hung in the air like a thunderclap. Emma immediately recognized it. Richard Blackwood, Adrian Laurent's CFO and oldest friend. The two had attended Harvard together, and Richard had been at Adrian's side when Laurent Industries expanded from a modest tech company to the global powerhouse it was today. "Miss Mitchell," Adrian said, his voice controlled, despite the fury in his eyes, "I'm going to ask you something unusual. Would you be willing to translate for my mother? Her sign language is a mix of ASL and a private system we developed when I was young, before she..." He trailed off. "I don't know sign language beyond the basics, sir," Emma admitted. "But you understood her last night, didn't you? When she couldn't speak." Emma nodded slowly. "Just simple things, gestures more than formal signs." Evelyn made a motion, capturing Emma's attention. She pointed to Emma, then to her own eyes, then touched her heart, a sequence that somehow Emma understood perfectly. "She says, 'I see with my heart,'" Emma translated, surprising herself. Adrian's eyebrows rose slightly. "Exactly right." He studied Emma with newfound interest. "Sometimes that's more valuable than technical knowledge. Mother has an electronic tablet for complex communication, but it was in her luggage, which is apparently still in that abandoned taxi." Emma nodded, suddenly understanding the strange position she now occupied. "I'll help however I can, sir. Thank you." Adrian turned back to the document, tapping it with one finger. "This is a copy of my father's original will, not the one that was executed after his death, a different one. According to this, mother was never disinherited. In fact, father left her controlling interest in Laurent Industries' European divisions." Emma's eyes widened. The official story, reported in business journals and whispered among staff, was that Jonathan Laurent had cut his wife out of his will following some unspecified betrayal. It had been a minor scandal in financial circles, quickly overshadowed by the company's continued success under Adrian's leadership. But everyone thought that she left in disgrace. Adrian's jaw tightened. That story came from the executor of the will, Richard Blackwood. He told me mother had requested privacy and a clean break after father died, that her silence was her choice. Evelyn made a series of emphatic gestures, her face flushed with emotion. "She says," Emma interpreted hesitantly, watching carefully, "that she never wanted to leave, that after her stroke Richard told her you blamed her for your father's heart attack, that you needed space to heal." Adrian closed his eyes briefly. Pain etched across his features. When he opened them again, his gaze was steel. "So while I believed she had abandoned us, she thought I had rejected her, and all this time, Richard has been controlling both narratives and profiting from them." Emma glanced between mother and son, witnessing the shared realization of years lost to deliberate deception. "But why would Mr. Blackwood do this? He's your closest advisor." "The European divisions," Adrian said grimly. "They've been operating under a separate corporate structure since father died, with Richard as acting CEO. If mother holds controlling interest." He turned to Evelyn. "Have you been receiving any income from those companies?" Evelyn shook her head and signed again. "Richard told her they were struggling, barely breaking even," Adrian translated, his voice hardening. "Which is interesting, considering they've been reporting consistent 20% growth for the past decade." The magnitude of the betrayal was staggering. Emma sat quietly, processing what she was witnessing. This wasn't just family drama, it was corporate theft on a massive scale. "What will you do?" she finally asked. Adrian checked his watch. "Richard lands from Singapore at noon. He's expecting to meet me at the office at 2. A cold smile touched his lips. "I think we'll surprise him here instead." Evelyn reached for her son's hand, making another series of signs with her free hand. She wants to clean up and rest before he arrives, Emma interpreted, and she needs her medication. It should be in her purse. Adrian nodded, suddenly looking guilty. Of course, I've been thoughtless, keeping you here answering questions when you need to rest. He stood. Ms. Mitchell, would you help my mother to the guest suite in the West Wing? I'll call Dr. Freeman to come check on her. Yes, sir, Emma said, rising as well. As she helped Evelyn to her feet, the older woman stumbled slightly, fatigue evident in her movements. The ordeal of the previous night had clearly taken its toll. I've got you, Emma said softly, supporting Evelyn's weight. To Adrian, she added, Sir, I think your mother might also need proper clothes. I could go into town if the roads are cleared. That won't be necessary, Adrian replied. Victoria's clothes are still in the East Wing. Mother and my wife were similar in size. His voice softened. Victoria would have wanted her to have them. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears at the mention of her late daughter-in-law. She signed something to Adrian, who nodded. She says Victoria wrote to her too, letters that she never received. Adrian's expression darkened again. Richard has much to answer for. As Emma guided Evelyn toward the West Wing, she felt the weight of the older woman's arm on hers and the even greater weight of the trust being placed in her. Somehow, in the span of 12 hours, she had gone from invisible maid to key witness in a family reunion that would likely shake the foundations of a billion-dollar company. The guest suite in the West Wing was elegant without being ostentatious, all cream-colored linens and polished walnut furniture. Emma helped Evelyn settle into an armchair while she prepared the bathroom for her. As she ran warm water into the massive soaking tub, adding a capful of lavender bath oil, Emma found herself wondering about the strange twists of fate that had brought her here. If she had left the mansion when the other staff did. If she hadn't heard that faint knock. If she had followed protocol and called security instead of opening the door. Evelyn appeared in the bathroom doorway, leaning against the frame. She made a gesture toward Emma, then pointed to the tub with a questioning look. Yes, it's ready for you, Emma said. Do you need help? Evelyn shook her head, then made another gesture, touching her heart and then pointing to Emma. You're welcome, Emma replied, understanding perfectly. I'll find you something to wear while you bathe. Making her way to the East Wing felt different now. The space that had always seemed haunted by Victoria Laurent's memory now felt like a resource, a way to help the woman who had been wronged for so long. Emma selected a simple blue cashmere sweater and wool trousers from Victoria's closet, along with practical undergarments and soft leather loafers. All still had tags on them. Victoria had been known for buying clothing she never wore. When Emma returned to the guest suite, she found Evelyn emerging from the bathroom, wrapped in a plush robe, looking refreshed but tired. She smiled at the clothes Emma had chosen and signed her thanks. These should be comfortable, Emma said, laying the garments on the bed. Is there anything else you need? Your son mentioned medication. Evelyn nodded and pantomimed drinking water, then made a small circular motion near her temple. Emma interpreted this as a need for water and possibly something for a headache. I'll get both, she promised. As she turned to leave, Evelyn caught her arm. The older woman looked at her intently, then made a series of gestures that Emma couldn't quite follow. I'm sorry, I don't understand, Emma said. Evelyn tried again, more slowly. She pointed to Emma, then made a gesture like opening a door, followed by touching her heart and finally pointing upward in a sweeping motion. When I opened the door, Emma began, trying to understand. Your heart rose, lifted. Evelyn nodded emphatically, then added another gesture, folding her hands together and resting them against her cheek in the universal sign for sleep, followed by her fingers walking across an invisible surface. When you were sleeping, you were walking, Emma guessed, confused. Evelyn shook her head in frustration, then tried once more. She pointed to herself, pretended to sleep, and then gestured as if pushing away darkness, followed by the walking fingers. Suddenly, Emma understood. You were lost, in the dark, and then found your way. She paused, comprehension dawning. You're saying it wasn't just chance that you came to the door I was behind, that somehow you were guided there. Evelyn's face lit up with relief. She nodded vigorously, then touched her heart and pointed to the ceiling, a gesture that needed no translation. Divine guidance. I'm not sure I believe in that kind of thing, Emma said honestly, but I'm glad I was there to open the door. Evelyn smiled knowingly, patting Emma's hand as if to say, believe what you will, but some things are meant to be. After ensuring Evelyn had everything she needed and promising to return shortly with water and pain medication, Emma headed back to the kitchen. To her surprise, Adrian was there, speaking intently into his phone. Absolutely crucial that he doesn't suspect anything. Yes, tell him I want to review the Singapore contracts at the house instead of the office. 2 o'clock sharp. He ended the call and noticed Emma hovering in the doorway. Is Mother settled? He asked. Yes, sir. She's resting comfortably. I was just getting her some water and something for a headache. Adrian nodded, opening a cabinet and retrieving a bottle of pain relievers. Here, Dr. Freeman will be here within the hour with her prescription medication. He paused, studying Emma with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. Ms. Mitchell, I want to thank you properly for what you did last night. Not many would have opened that door. It was nothing, sir. Anyone would have... No, he interrupted. They wouldn't have, and we both know it. He set the pill bottle on the counter beside a glass of water. When this is all over, we need to discuss your position here. Emma's heart sank. Despite his gratitude, she had broken protocol. Am I being let go? To her surprise, Adrian looked genuinely startled. Let go? Absolutely not. Quite the opposite. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. But that's a conversation for later. For now, I need you to help me prepare for Richard's arrival. Relief washed over Emma. Of course, what can I do? Stay with my mother, keep her comfortable, and when Richard arrives, I want you both out of sight until I call for you. Can you do that? Emma nodded, understanding the strategy. Richard Blackwood needed to be confronted with his deceptions without warning, and Evelyn and Emma were the surprise witnesses who would make denial impossible. I can do that, sir. Good. Adrian's phone buzzed with another call. He checked the screen, and his expression hardened. Speaking of the devil, I need to take this. As Emma gathered the water and medication for Evelyn, she heard Adrian answer with a perfectly casual, Richard, yes, change of plans. The roads are still bad near the office. His ability to sound completely normal while knowing what he now knew was impressive and slightly terrifying. Emma had never paid much attention to the business side of Adrian Laurent's life, but now she understood how he had become such a formidable force in the corporate world. Behind the polite exterior was a man of steel. The next few hours passed in a strange limbo of anticipation. Dr. Freeman came and went, pronouncing Evelyn tired but remarkably well considering her ordeal. Evelyn napped while Emma sat quietly in an adjacent sitting room, catching up on missed text messages from her roommate and making vague excuses for her absence. At precisely 1:55 p.m., Adrian appeared at the guest suite door. His expression was composed, but Emma could sense the tension radiating from him. It's time, he said simply. Richard just passed through the main gate. Evelyn, who had awakened and changed into the clothes Emma had brought, straightened her shoulders and nodded resolutely. There was no fear in her eyes, only determination and a hint of righteous anger. Where should we wait? Emma asked. The small study adjacent to the main library. You'll be able to hear everything, but he won't see you until I call you in. Adrian looked between them. Are you both ready? Evelyn signed something to her son, and he actually smiled. A cold, dangerous smile that transformed his face. Mother says, he translated for Emma's benefit, that she's been ready for 5 years. As they made their way to the study, Emma felt a strange calm settle over her. Whatever happened next would change the course of multiple lives forever, and somehow she had become an essential part of it all, from invisible to indispensable in the space of a single storm-filled night. The small study was warm and intimate, with bookshelves lining the walls and a pair of comfortable leather armchairs arranged near a window overlooking the snow-covered gardens. Emma helped Evelyn settle into one of them while they waited in tense silence. Through the partially open door, they could see a slice of the main library, enough to witness the coming confrontation without being immediately visible. Adrian had positioned himself at his father's old desk, casually reviewing documents as if this were any ordinary business meeting. Only the tight set of his shoulders betrayed his true state of mind. At precisely 2 o'clock, they heard the distant sound of the front door opening, followed by voices in the foyer, Mrs. Caldwell greeting someone, then directing them to the library. Moments later, Richard Blackwood strode into view. In her 2 years at the mansion, Emma had seen Richard perhaps a dozen times, always impeccably dressed, confident and charming. Today was no exception. Tall and lean, with salt and pepper hair and rimless glasses, he carried an expensive leather briefcase and wore a bespoke suit that had probably cost more than Emma earned in 3 months. "Adrian," he said warmly, extending his hand. "Good to see you back. How was Tokyo?" Adrian stood, accepting the handshake with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Productive. The Nakamura deal is almost finalized." "Excellent." Richard set his briefcase on a side table. "I've brought the Singapore contracts as requested. Though I'm curious why you wanted to review them here rather than at the office." "This particular matter required privacy," Adrian replied, gesturing for Richard to take a seat. "Something's come up that I wanted to discuss with you. Man to man, so to speak." Richard settled into the chair opposite Adrian, his expression mildly curious. "Sounds serious." "Oh, it is." Adrian opened a drawer in the desk and withdrew the water-damaged document Evelyn had given him that morning. He placed it on the desk, but kept his hand covering it. "Richard, how long have we known each other?" The CFO looked momentarily puzzled by the shift in conversation. "Since Harvard. 22 years now." 22 years, Adrian echoed. "That's a long time. Almost half our lives." He paused, studying the other man's face. "In all that time, I've trusted you implicitly, with my company, with my family's legacy, with my personal affairs." Richard nodded, a flicker of unease crossing his features. "And I've always taken that trust seriously." "Have you?" Adrian asked softly. Without waiting for an answer, he continued. "Do you remember what you told me after my father's funeral about my mother?" The question clearly caught Richard off guard. He shifted slightly in his chair. "I believe I told you what she requested, that she wanted to start fresh abroad, away from painful memories." "That's right," Adrian said, his tone deceptively conversational. "You also said she felt partially responsible for Father's heart attack, that the stress of their arguments had contributed to his condition." "Yes, well," Richard cleared his throat. "That was my understanding of the situation." Adrian nodded thoughtfully. "And later, after her stroke, you told me she didn't want to see me, that she preferred to recover in privacy, away from family complications." "Adrian," Richard said, a note of caution entering his voice, "where is this going? We have contracts to review and dredging up these painful family matters." "Just one more question," Adrian interrupted, his voice hardening almost imperceptibly. "The European divisions that my father established, you've been overseeing them since his death, correct?" "As we agreed," Richard replied, now visibly uncomfortable. "They've been performing adequately, though not spectacularly. The quarterly reports—" "Yes, the quarterly reports." Adrian finally removed his hand from the document, sliding it across the desk. "I'd like you to take a look at this." Richard's eyes flickered down to the paper, then back to Adrian's face. "What is this?" "It's a copy of my father's original will, the real one. Not the altered version you presented to the probate court 12 years ago." The color drained from Richard's face. "I don't know what you're talking about. The will that was executed was the one your father signed. If someone has shown you a different document, it's clearly a forgery." "Is it?" Adrian leaned forward. "Because this version leaves controlling interest in the European divisions to my mother. The same mother you told me wanted nothing to do with the family business. The same mother who, according to you, chose to live abroad on a modest allowance rather than remain involved with Laurent Industries." Richard's expression hardened. Adrian, I don't know who's been feeding you these conspiracy theories, but no more lies, Richard. Adrian's voice cut like a blade. I know everything about how you intercepted my mother's communications, how you told her I blamed her for my father's death and didn't want to see her, how you've been systematically embezzling millions from the European divisions while reporting minimal profits. Richard stood abruptly, his facade of confusion giving way to cold calculation. These are serious accusations. If you're planning to make them publicly, you'd better have more than a water-damaged document of questionable provenance. Oh, I have more, Adrian said calmly. Much more. From her hiding place, Emma watched the confrontation with her heart racing. Beside her, Evelyn sat perfectly still, her eyes never leaving Richard's face, as if memorizing every flicker of expression. I've spent the morning making some interesting calls, Adrian continued, to the directors of our European subsidiaries, to our banking partners in Geneva and Frankfurt, to the private nursing facility in Switzerland, where you supposedly relayed my messages to my mother. He shook his head slowly. It's remarkable how quickly people confess when they realize they might be implicated in fraud. Richard's composure visibly cracked. His eyes darted toward the door, as if calculating his chances of simply walking away from the confrontation. Don't, Adrian warned, noting the glance. Security is already aware of the situation. For a tense moment, neither man spoke. Then Richard's expression changed, a cold smile spreading across his face. Fine, he said, adjusting his cufflinks with deliberate calm. Let's say, hypothetically, that there were some financial irregularities in the European operations. Even if that were true, it would be nearly impossible to prove without years of litigation. And the scandal would devastate Laurent Industries' stock price. He shrugged. Is that really what you want, Adrian? To destroy everything your father built over what amounts to a family squabble? Adrian's expression remained impassive. Is that your play? Threatening mutual destruction? I prefer to think of it as a realistic assessment of our situation, Richard replied. Perhaps we could come to an arrangement. I stepped down quietly with a generous severance package. You regain full control of the European divisions, and we both avoid a messy, public legal battle. You seem to be under the impression that you have leverage in this situation. Don't I? Richard's confidence seemed to be returning. It's your word against mine regarding your mother's wishes. And as for the financial matters, well, I've been very careful. The paper trail is minimal. Adrian studied the man across from him, his friend and advisor of more than 2 decades, with an expression of almost clinical interest. You know what my father used to say about you? That you were brilliant, but fundamentally lazy. That you always looked for shortcuts. A thin smile crossed his face. He was right. Richard stiffened. What's that supposed to mean? It means you didn't cover your tracks as well as you think. While you were busy creating shell companies and offshore accounts, you overlooked something rather basic. And what might that be? Adrian's smile widened slightly. Witnesses. With deliberate calm, he turned toward the study door. Mother, Ms. Mitchell, would you join us, please? The shock that registered on Richard's face when Evelyn Laurent emerged from the study was something Emma knew she would never forget. It was more than surprise. It was the look of a man watching his carefully constructed world collapse in an instant. Evelyn, he breathed, taking an involuntary step backward. This is impossible. You're in Switzerland. Evelyn fixed him with a gaze of pure contempt as she made her way to her son's side. Emma followed, feeling strangely calm despite the tension crackling in the room. Mother arrived last night during the snowstorm, Adrian explained. Her taxi abandoned her at the end of the driveway. She nearly died trying to reach me, to warn me about you. Richard's eyes darted between the 3 of them, his mind visibly racing. I don't know what lies she's told you, but Evelyn has been unwell. Her condition affects more than just her speech. Her grip on reality has been questionable since the stroke. Evelyn's hands moved in a flurry of signs, her expression fierce. Mother says, Adrian translated coldly, that her mind is perfectly clear. Clear enough to remember how you came to her after her stroke and told her I blamed her for father's death. Clear enough to remember how you intercepted every letter and email she tried to send me. Clear enough to remember how you claimed the European divisions were failing when in fact they were thriving. Richard's face hardened. The word of a disabled old woman and a maid? He scoffed, hardly compelling evidence in court. Emma felt a surge of indignation at his dismissive tone, but before she could speak, Adrian continued. The maid, as you so condescendingly call her, provided shelter to my mother when you had arranged for her to be stranded. And as for evidence, Adrian pressed a button on his desk phone. Carter, please join us. The door to the library opened again, and a man Emma recognized as Adrian's head of security entered. He carried a tablet computer. Mr. Blackwood, Carter nodded curtly. I've completed the digital forensics you requested, Mr. Laurent. We've recovered the deleted emails and text messages from the company servers, including communications with the nursing facility in Switzerland, instructing them to prevent Mrs. Laurent from contacting you directly. Richard's facade finally crumbled completely. This is a setup, he snarled. You can't possibly... We also found evidence of the fund transfers, Carter continued impassively. The shell companies were registered using variants of Mr. Blackwood's children's birth dates as authentication codes. Rather careless. Adrian rose from his desk, buttoning his suit jacket with deliberate precision. As I said, brilliant but lazy. Richard's expression twisted with rage. You sanctimonious bastard! You would have done exactly the same thing in my position. The European divisions were practically being gifted to a woman who had no idea how to run them. That wasn't your decision to make, Adrian replied evenly, and we'll never know what might have happened because you stole that opportunity from both of us. He nodded to Carter. Please escort Mr. Blackwood to the security office. The FBI will be arriving shortly to take his statement regarding the wire fraud charges. You're having me arrested? Richard's voice rose in disbelief. After everything I've done for this company? For you? No, Richard, Adrian said quietly. After everything you've done to this company, to my family. As Carter moved forward, Richard made one last desperate attempt. Adrian, be reasonable. We can still resolve this privately. Think about the scandal, the negative publicity. I'm done caring about appearances. Adrian cut him off. My mother nearly died last night because of your machinations. The time for private resolutions has passed. Emma watched as Carter firmly gripped Richard's arm, guiding him toward the door. The once powerful CFO seemed to have aged a decade in the span of 15 minutes. His shoulders slumped in defeat. At the threshold, Richard paused, looking back at Evelyn with undisguised hatred. You should have stayed away, old woman. You've ruined everything. Evelyn's hands moved in a single eloquent gesture that required no translation. Richard flinched as if slapped, then allowed himself to be led away. In the silence that followed, Emma stood awkwardly, feeling like an intruder on a profoundly personal moment between mother and son. She was about to excuse herself when Adrian turned to her. Ms. Mitchell, he said, his voice gentler than she had ever heard it. I believe I owe you a debt that can never be fully repaid. Emma shook her head. I only did what anyone would do, sir. No, Adrian disagreed. You did what no one else did. You saw a person in need and acted with compassion, regardless of rules or consequences. His gaze was steady, evaluating. That kind of moral clarity is rare and valuable. Evelyn touched her son's arm, making a series of signs that Emma couldn't follow. Adrian watched attentively, then nodded. Mother suggests, he said with the ghost of a smile, that we have much to discuss about your future here. But perhaps that conversation can wait until we've all had a chance to process today's events. Of course, Emma agreed, relief washing over her. The emotional intensity of the past 24 hours was beginning to take its toll. Will there be anything else you need from me today? No, Adrian said. You've done more than enough. Please, take the rest of the day and tomorrow as paid leave. I suspect the coming weeks will be rather eventful around here. As Emma turned to leave, Evelyn caught her hand. The older woman's eyes were bright with tears as she signed something directly to Emma, a gesture of touching her fingers to her lips, then to her heart, and finally extending her hand outward. "She's saying thank you," Adrian translated softly. From the depths of her heart, Emma squeezed Evelyn's hand gently. "You're welcome," she replied. "Truly." As she walked through the grand hallways of the Laurent mansion toward the staff exit, Emma felt a strange sense of disorientation. 24 hours ago, she had been just another invisible service worker in a world of wealth and privilege. Now she had played a pivotal role in exposing a massive fraud and reuniting a long-separated family. Outside, the world was transformed by the previous night's storm. Familiar landscapes rendered new and unfamiliar under a blanket of pristine snow. It seemed fitting somehow. Like the grounds of the estate, Emma's life had been utterly changed by forces beyond her control. What that change would ultimately mean remained to be seen. But as she made her way carefully down the cleared driveway, Emma felt, for the first time in years, a sense of genuine possibility opening before her. The storm had passed, and in its wake, nothing would ever be the same again. 2 weeks passed in a blur of unprecedented changes at the Laurent estate. Emma, who had expected to return to her regular duties after her 2 days of leave, instead found herself in an entirely new role, one that even now she struggled to define. Personal assistant was the official title Adrian had offered her, but it hardly captured the scope of her responsibilities. In practice, she had become a crucial liaison between Adrian, Evelyn, and the rapidly restructuring Laurent Industries. The morning sun streamed through the windows of what had once been Victoria Laurent's private sitting room in the East Wing. Now it served as Evelyn's temporary office, while more permanent arrangements were being made. Emma sat across from the older woman, tablet in hand, reviewing the day's schedule. "The lawyers will be here at 11 to discuss the European holdings," Emma said, checking the calendar. "Then lunch with Adrian, followed by your physical therapy at 2. Evelyn nodded, her hands moving in the sign language Emma had been diligently learning. After 2 weeks of intensive practice, Emma could now understand about half of what Evelyn signed directly. "Yes, Dr. Freeman said the new medication is showing promising results," Emma replied to Evelyn's query. "He's optimistic about potential speech recovery, though it will take time." The door opened and Adrian entered, his phone to his ear. "Absolutely not. The board meeting proceeds as scheduled. Richard's supporters can protest all they want." He ended the call with a sigh. "Good morning, Mother. Ms. Mitchell." Despite his insistence that Emma call him Adrian in her new role, she found herself clinging to formalities. Old habits died hard. "Good morning, sir. Coffee? Please." He took a seat beside his mother, accepting the tablet Emma passed to him. "The press release goes out at noon. Our PR team has prepared statements for both the business and financial press. Mother, they'd like a photo of us together for the announcement, if you're comfortable with that." Evelyn signed her agreement, then added something that made Adrian smile, a genuine smile that transformed his usually serious face. "Mother says she wants you in the photo as well, Ms. Mitchell," he translated, "as the person who made our reunion possible." Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks. "That's really not necessary, but it is appropriate," Adrian interrupted gently. "Your role in this story is significant. The lonely housekeeper who showed compassion to a stranger during a storm, unwittingly changing the course of a billion-dollar company and reuniting a family torn apart by deception." He raised an eyebrow. "It's a narrative the public will connect with." Over the past 2 weeks, Emma had observed a different side of Adrian Laurent. The coldly efficient businessman remained, but there was a warmth now, a humanity that had been buried beneath years of isolation and mistrust. His reunion with his mother had awakened something long dormant. "The FBI has officially charged Richard," Adrian continued, his expression darkening. "Wire fraud, embezzlement, obstruction of justice. The list goes on. His attorneys are already floating the possibility of a plea deal." Evelyn signed a question. "No, Mother, I don't intend to show mercy," Adrian replied firmly. "What he did to you, to us, was unforgivable. He'll face the full consequences of his actions." Emma poured coffee for Adrian and tea for Evelyn, listening to their exchange. The legal and financial fallout from Richard's deception was staggering in its scope. Entire departments of Laurent Industries were being restructured, especially the European divisions, which were far more profitable than anyone had realized. "Ms. Mitchell," Adrian said as he accepted the coffee, "have you given any thought to my offer?" Emma hesitated. The previous day, Adrian had proposed a permanent position, not just as his assistant, but as his mother's interpreter and companion, with a salary that had nearly caused Emma to drop her tablet in shock. "I'm still considering it, sir," she replied carefully. "It's a significant change. From cleaning floors to helping run a multinational corporation." His lips quirked in a half-smile. "Yes, I imagine it is." Evelyn signed something, her expression serious. "Mother says," Adrian translated, "that you have a natural gift for understanding people, not just their words, but their intentions. She believes you were meant to find your way to a position of greater influence." Emma felt a tightness in her throat at the unexpected praise. "That's very kind, but I have no experience in business." "Experience can be acquired," Adrian said dismissively. "Integrity and intuition like yours are far rarer commodities." Before Emma could respond, Adrian's phone rang again. He checked the screen and stood. "The Tokyo team. I need to take this. Mother, we'll continue our discussion about the European restructuring after my call." When he had gone, Evelyn beckoned Emma to sit closer. There was something almost conspiratorial in her smile as she began to sign. "You're wondering if you belong here," Emma interpreted slowly, careful to understand each gesture. "In this world of wealth and power." Evelyn nodded, then continued signing. "You felt the same way when you married Jonathan," Emma translated, surprised. "Like an outsider who didn't deserve her place." This was new information. Emma had always assumed Evelyn came from the same privileged background as the Laurent family. Evelyn confirmed her assumption was wrong with another series of signs. "You were a receptionist at his first company," Emma said, amazed at this revelation. "He pursued you despite the disapproval of his family." Evelyn nodded, a wistful expression crossing her face as she continued her silent story. Emma followed as best she could, occasionally asking for clarification. The picture that emerged was far different from the public narrative of the Laurent family. Jonathan Laurent had fallen in love with his receptionist, marrying her against his parents' wishes. Together, they had built Laurent Industries from a modest technology startup into an international conglomerate. Evelyn had been not just a wife, but a partner in the truest sense, managing the European expansion while Jonathan focused on North American operations. "So when Richard said you had no experience with the business," Emma began. Evelyn's expression hardened as she signed forcefully. "He knew exactly what he was doing," Emma finished for her. "He wasn't just stealing money, he was erasing your legacy." Evelyn reached for Emma's hand, squeezing it gently before signing again. "Don't make my mistake," Emma translated. "Don't let others define your worth or your place." The simple wisdom of those words settled over Emma like a warm blanket. For 2 years, she had defined herself by her position, just a maid, invisible and unimportant. But a single act of kindness had revealed the arbitrariness of such definitions. "I'll accept the position," Emma said suddenly, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "But on one condition." Evelyn raised her eyebrows questioningly. "I want to enroll in business classes," Emma said. "If I'm going to be part of this world, I want to understand it properly, not just be carried along by circumstance." Evelyn's face lit up with approval. She signed enthusiastically. "Adrian will arrange everything," Emma translated, smiling, "and you'll help me." The older woman nodded firmly, then signed something else, a phrase Emma had come to recognize over the past 2 weeks. "Open doors," she translated. It was Evelyn's favorite metaphor, that life was a series of doors. And courage was what allowed you to open them, even when you didn't know what waited on the other side. As if summoned by their conversation, the actual door opened and Adrian returned. "That was quick," Emma observed. "The Tokyo team is exceeding expectations," he replied. He looked between them, noting their expressions. "I've missed something, haven't I?" Evelyn signed and Adrian's eyebrows rose. "You've accepted the position," he confirmed, looking at Emma. "With one condition," Emma replied. "I'd like to pursue business education while working. I want to earn my place here, not just occupy it." Something like respect flickered in Adrian's eyes. "Agreed. I'll have HR arrange a flexible schedule that accommodates your studies." He hesitated, then added, "And Ms. Mitchell, I think it's time you called me Adrian." Emma smiled. "I'll try. Adrian." Outside, the last of the snow was melting, giving way to the first hints of spring. Like the changing seasons, Emma Mitchell's life had transformed overnight, from invisible to essential, from servant to colleague. The journey ahead would not be easy. There would be those who resented her rise, who questioned her qualifications, who saw only a maid who had stumbled into fortune. But as she sat in the sunlit room with Evelyn Laurent's supportive presence beside her, Emma felt ready to face whatever challenges came. She had opened a door during a snowstorm. And now, a world of new doors stretched before her, waiting only for the courage to open them. 6 months later, the Laurent estate basked in the golden light of an early autumn afternoon. The maple trees lining the long driveway had begun their transformation, their leaves touched with flaming reds and burnished oranges. Emma paused on the terrace, taking a moment to appreciate the view before heading inside for the board meeting. Her life had changed so dramatically in the past half-year that sometimes she still felt like she was living someone else's story. The maid who had opened a door during a snowstorm was now Emma Mitchell, junior executive assistant to the CEO of Laurent Industries and part-time business student at the University of Rochester. Her phone buzzed with a message from Adrian. "Where are you? Mother's getting impatient." Emma smiled, texting back, "On my way, just enjoying the view." As she entered the mansion through the French doors, Emma couldn't help but compare her current path through the house to her former one. Now, instead of slipping through service corridors with cleaning supplies, she walked confidently through the main hallways with a tablet and portfolio. Instead of the plain black and white uniform, she wore a tailored navy suit, a gift from Evelyn, who had insisted on upgrading Emma's wardrobe to match her new position. The East Wing, once a shrine to Victoria's memory, had been transformed into a functional family space. Evelyn had gently but firmly convinced Adrian that his late wife would have wanted the rooms used, not preserved like a museum. Now, the spacious former sitting room served as a secondary conference room for meetings too personal or sensitive for the corporate headquarters. Emma entered to find Adrian and Evelyn already seated at the oval table, along with Carter, now promoted to Chief of Security, and Patricia Winters, the newly appointed CFO who had replaced Richard Blackwood. "Sorry I'm late," Emma said, taking her seat beside Evelyn. "Campus traffic was terrible." "How was your strategic management class?" Adrian asked, surprising her with his recollection of her schedule. "Challenging," Emma admitted, "but fascinating. We're studying corporate restructuring cases, actually, including Laurent Industries' European reorganization." "You're living your case study," Patricia observed with a smile. At 52, with silver-streaked dark hair and razor-sharp intelligence, she had quickly proven herself the perfect antidote to Richard's years of manipulation. Not many students can say that. Evelyn signed something, and Emma laughed. Her sign language skills had improved dramatically. She now understood about 90% of Evelyn's communications directly. "Evelyn says I have an unfair advantage since I've seen the confidential files." Emma translated for the others. "Speaking of which," Adrian said, bringing them back to business, "let's begin. The purpose of today's meeting is to finalize the preparations for tomorrow's charity gala and the accompanying announcement." The Laurent Foundation annual gala had been reinstated after a 12-year hiatus, another of Richard's manipulations exposed. The charitable organization, originally founded by Jonathan and Evelyn Laurent, had been systematically gutted during Richard's tenure as CFO, its funds diverted and its activities minimized. Tomorrow night would mark its triumphant return, with a black tie event expected to raise millions for educational initiatives across the country. The guest list is confirmed at 327 attendees, Emma reported, pulling up the details on her tablet. All major news outlets will be present for the announcement. The security protocols have been reviewed and approved by Carter's team. And the scholarship program details? Adrian prompted. Finalized yesterday, Patricia confirmed. 100 full scholarships annually, with priority given to students from disadvantaged backgrounds pursuing careers in technology, healthcare, and education. Evelyn signed enthusiastically, and Emma smiled. Evelyn is particularly pleased with the special provision for students with disabilities, she translated. The additional support services go well beyond ADA requirements. Adrian nodded with evident satisfaction. Father would have approved. It was always his belief that talent could be found anywhere, if only given the opportunity to flourish. His gaze lingered briefly on Emma as he said this. The meeting continued for another hour, covering security arrangements, press management, and final logistical details. Throughout, Emma marveled at how naturally she now contributed to these discussions. 6 months of intensive learning, both formal and informal, had given her a solid foundation. She still had much to learn, but no longer felt like an imposter in these rooms. As the meeting concluded and Patricia and Carter departed, Adrian turned to Emma with an unexpected question. Have you selected your gown for tomorrow night? Emma blinked in surprise. I assumed I'd be working the event, not attending as a guest. Evelyn signed rapidly, her expression incredulous. Mother says, and I agree, Adrian translated with amusement, that the idea of you working behind the scenes is absurd. You'll be seated at the main table with us. But I've never attended anything like this, Emma protested. I wouldn't know how to— Nonsense, Adrian interrupted. You've been handling executives and board members with perfect poise for months. A few socialites and politicians will be child's play in comparison. Evelyn signed again, and Adrian nodded. An excellent point. Emma, Mother would like to lend you something from her collection for the occasion, if you're comfortable with that. The offer touched Emma deeply. I'd be honored. An hour later, Emma found herself in Evelyn's suite, surrounded by garment bags that had been retrieved from storage. The older woman had assembled an impressive collection during her years as the wife of a corporate titan, and despite the intervening time, many of the pieces remained timeless. Evelyn unzipped a bag to reveal a midnight blue gown with a subtle shimmer, its elegant simplicity perfect for a charity event. Emma caught her breath at the sight. It's beautiful, she said softly. Evelyn signed that it had been one of her favorites, worn to the very first Laurent Foundation gala nearly 30 years earlier. Are you sure? Emma asked. It must hold special memories. Evelyn's response was emphatic. That was precisely why she wanted Emma to wear it. The cycle was completing itself, the foundation reborn, the family reunited, and now the dress finding new purpose. As Emma carefully tried on the gown, which fit as if it had been made for her, she reflected on the strange symmetry of it all. The snowstorm that had brought Evelyn to the mansion had been the catalyst, but it was the human connections formed in its aftermath that had truly transformed everything. What do you think? Emma asked, turning to face Evelyn after zipping up the dress. The older woman's eyes filled with tears as she signed, perfect, like it was waiting for you. The following evening, as Emma stood before the mirror in her apartment, the full impact of her transformation hit her. The woman staring back, poised, elegant, dressed in Evelyn's gown with her dark hair swept up, bore little resemblance to the invisible maid who had once polished the very floors she would walk across tonight as an honored guest. Her roommate, Lily, appeared in the doorway and whistled low. If you'd told me a year ago that you'd be attending the Laurent Gala as part of the family, I'd have had you committed." Emma laughed. "Sometimes I still don't believe it myself." "Well, believe this," Lily said, handing her a small velvet box. "This just arrived by courier. The card says it's from Evelyn." Curious, Emma opened the box to find a simple yet exquisite pair of sapphire earrings. The accompanying note read, "To remind you that sometimes the most valuable things come from unexpected places. With love and gratitude, Evelyn." The Laurent Foundation Gala exceeded even Emma's expectations. The ballroom of the Rochester Grand Hotel had been transformed into an elegant wonderland, with crystal chandeliers casting warm light over tables adorned with autumn flowers. Business leaders, politicians, and celebrities mingled with educators and non-profit directors, all united by the Foundation's mission. At the main table, Emma sat between Evelyn and Patricia, acutely aware of the curious glances directed her way. Her meteoric rise within the Laurent organization had not gone unnoticed in business circles, sparking inevitable speculation and gossip. "Ignore them," Patricia murmured, noticing Emma's discomfort. "Half of them are jealous, and the other half are trying to figure out how to poach you for their own companies." Emma smiled gratefully. "I doubt that." "Don't," Patricia replied simply. "I've been in this world for 30 years. I know talent when I see it." The evening proceeded with speeches, awards, and the formal announcement of the scholarship program. When Adrian called Emma to the stage to help present the Foundation's new initiatives, she felt a moment of panic. Then she caught Evelyn's eye. The older woman signed a simple message: "Open doors." Taking a deep breath, Emma walked onto the stage with confidence she hadn't known she possessed. Later, as the evening wound down and the guests began to depart, Emma found herself on the hotel's terrace, taking a moment of quiet after the whirlwind of the event. The night air was cool but not cold, carrying the scent of autumn leaves. "There you are." Adrian's voice came from behind her. He joined her at the railing, loosening his bow tie with one finger. "Hiding from your admirers?" Emma laughed. "Hardly. Just taking a breath. It's been quite a night." "Indeed." Adrian gazed out at the city lights. "The Foundation raised nearly twice our target amount. Mother is ecstatic." "She should be proud," Emma said. "The scholarship program will change lives." "Like yours was changed?" Adrian asked, studying her face in the soft lighting. Emma considered this. "Yes and no. The opportunities you and Evelyn have given me are extraordinary, but the potential was always there," Adrian finished for her. "The storm just opened a door." "Exactly." She smiled at his use of Evelyn's favorite metaphor. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before Adrian spoke again. "I have something to ask you," he said, his tone more serious. "The London office needs a liaison for the European restructuring, someone who understands both the business and family dynamics involved." He turned to face her directly. "Mother suggested you." Emma blinked in surprise. "Me? But I'm still learning, still in school." "You would continue your education there. London has excellent universities." Adrian's expression was earnest. "It would be challenging, certainly, but Mother believes, and I agree, that you're ready for more responsibility." The offer hung in the air between them, unexpected, yet somehow fitting. Another door opening, another transformation on the horizon. "I'd need time to consider it," Emma said carefully. Adrian nodded. "Of course, no rush." He glanced back toward the ballroom, where the last guests were saying their goodbyes. "We should rejoin Mother." As they walked back inside, Emma's mind raced with possibilities. London, a new role, new responsibilities, new challenges. 6 months ago, the idea would have terrified her. Now it felt like the natural next step on a journey that had begun with a simple act of kindness during a snowstorm. That night, as the first snowflakes of a new season began to fall outside her apartment window, Emma Mitchell made her decision. She would go to London. She would continue to open doors, continue to grow into the person Evelyn and Adrian believed she could be. Because sometimes the maid who breaks the rules ends up rewriting the story, not just for others, but for herself as well.